Welcome to episode 11 of WooWoo for the Skeptic. I'm Kim Polinder, your host and curiosity advocate for the world of metaphysics. Today's interview takes another dive into left-brained perspectives on energy healing. Are you tired or perhaps confused by some of the terms that get tossed around in the world of spirituality? Could you care less if your Kundalini awakening restructured your aura and activated your 9th and 10th chakras? Are you wondering what a chakra even is? Stay tuned as I attempt to demystify the quantum world of energy and the body. I really love getting feedback from you about the show, and I encourage you to keep the feedback coming. My intention for this podcast is to disseminate as much information as I can about the show's topics and to present it in a way that's encouraging, informative, and supportive for you. I've received some comments that some of the terms that I or guests have used can be confusing. For example, what do they mean by healing or witnessing a healing, or what is a chakra? So today I'll take a few minutes and answer one of those questions and give an overview of what chakras are. The word chakra means wheel or disc. They're thought to be little spinning discs of energy, and it's believed that they correspond to nerve centers and determine how our body interacts with energies around us. Ideally, you want your chakras to be open so that energy can flow easily between the chakras for your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. You can muscle test to see if a particular chakra is open or not. Certain organs are tied to certain chakras, so that's another way to gauge their health. And there are even tests online that you can take to give you a good idea about your chakra health. And if chakras are blocked, what do you do? Well, the first thing to do is look at the issues or belief systems associated with that chakra and see what you can shift in your life related to that. Regular meditation will also keep chakras open, in addition to energy healing techniques that can also open and balance the chakras. So, what are the 7 main chakras? The first chakra is your root chakra and is located at the base of your spine. This energy wheel is colored red and is related to survival, security, and basic needs. Financial issues, housing, these are all related to the first chakra. And the organs directly affected are the kidneys, bladder, colon, and reproductive glands. The second energy wheel is colored orange and located just above the first, and this one is called the sacral chakra. This is related to the inner child, so your emotions. Also related to creativity, nurturing, and being able to receive from others. The body parts affected are the adrenal glands, spleen, as well as the kidneys and bladder. The third chakra is yellow and is called the solar plexus chakra, and it's located in the stomach area. This is our source of confidence and empowerment and inner strength. The body systems affected are the pancreas, liver, stomach, as well as the nervous system. So people with anxiety issues typically have challenges with their third chakra. The fourth chakra is the heart chakra, which is our source of love and connection with others. The outer chakra is green and the inner part is pink. This chakra is the regulator of your emotional life, love, and compassion. The organs affected are the heart, blood, circulatory system, and immune system. The fifth chakra is the throat chakra, and it's a baby blue color. This chakra represents communication, our ability to speak our truth, express our feelings, and stand up for ourselves through our voice. The body systems related to the throat chakra are the neck, thyroid, glands, jaw, mouth, and vocal cords. The sixth chakra is located in between our eyebrows and is an indigo blue color. This is also known as our third eye, which is our seat of intuition. The systems it's tied to are the pituitary and pineal gland. And finally, the seventh chakra is called the crown chakra and is represented as white or violet. It's located a few inches above your head, and this is our source of connection to spirit, to God, or whatever higher intelligence you might believe is out there. And this represents your belief systems, both unconscious and conscious. This chakra is also tied to the pineal gland. My conversation with my guest today was very unique in that she has a very down-to-earth approach to energy work. She is very forthcoming about the fact that she doesn't really know how her energy healing modality works, just that it does work. So if you're tired of the New Age languaging, but are still curious about the experience of energy healing, this may be the energy healer for you. Joining me today is Amy Morgan from my old stomping grounds of Seattle, Washington. Amy graduated from the Northwest School of Healing, where she was trained in Barbara Brennan techniques, body-based psychotherapy, inner child work, and Reiki master training through the lineage of Iris Ishakura. Amy, thank you so much for being on the show and welcome.
Thank you.
So I was taking a look at your website and I was very intrigued by the fact that you worked in the tech industry like myself. I know that you already come from a very healthy left brain foundation, which is great. How was it that you became involved with the WooWoo world?
I had a girlfriend who I used to call my WooWoo point person. You know, like everyone's got that friend who goes and does like every crazy thing. She would go out and she'd be like, oh, I want to talk to the psychic, or like, I went to see an angel lady, or, you know, whatever. And I'd pack her girlfriends, and I would always be like, angels, like, whatever. It's really stupid. And then eventually everybody would have gone to see the angel lady, and they're like, I have 4 guardian angels, and they told me all these things about my life. And then finally I would succumb to like jealousy and peer pressure and be like, or how many guardian angels I have. And then I would go see the angel lady. I know that's not a great testimony for my character, but, basically, she recommended this one. I don't know. I had like the flu at some point. I had a cold or something. She says, oh, you should go see this woman who does energy work. All the mushy, weird stuff that people say about energy work. She's like, no, she just like aligns your energy. And there's a woman who had gone to Barbara Brennan's school on the East Coast. And I basically had like just an intense, practically psychedelic experience. Not everybody takes to it. It's not for everybody, but it was for me. Whatever it was that happened was big and profound.
Was this just like an intuitive reading, or was it an actual energy healing session?
It was an actual energy healing session, laying on a massage table, and she's laying on hands from my feet to my crown, adjusting my chakras, you know, whatever that means, doing all the things that happen in energy work, and just pulling up. I mean, I was processing like, you know, I was in my 20s, and I was processing like stuff about my childhood, like all of this just like intense emotion that was held in my body from my whole history, basically. Just started moving and releasing. I was making connections. I remember at one point I had this image of like totally psychedelic. I had this image of like my rib cage opening up like garden gates, and then all these flowers growing up out of my chest, and I'm like crying, and I'm like, what's happening? And she's just like, there. Look at all those feelings. Did you not know you had those? So I went to her until I moved. I moved from Austin to Seattle. I just called it a lady. Like, it's like I wanted a lady to do the thing. And I didn't know what it was called. And I'm like, how do I find my lady who does the thing? Finally, I sort of figured out like what to Google around for. And I found another lady who did the thing. And she kept trying to talk me into coming to this school that she had gone to. And I felt really put off by it. It felt like super culty. I don't know. I just resisted and resisted. I basically was just dragged into woo, like kicking and screaming. But the thing about it is that for me, it worked. It moves me profoundly, and I see it moving other people profoundly in a way that they're not able to do in physical therapies, you know, like body moving therapies, and they're not able to accomplish in psychotherapy. It's in this sort of beautiful space in between. Amazing things happen that I don't even pretend to understand. But that's how I came to it, is that I ended up going to this culty school. It totally changed my life.
What would you say was the most convincing then? Just the experiential aspect?
Yeah, just purely experiential. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I can hardly stand to hear myself talk about it sometimes. Because like it just raises so many questions. And so being in a school for 5 years, I mean, the woman who ran my school was like a PhD psychotherapist, super smart, basically ran it like a group therapy session, but with all of this education piece. And then there's the energy work laid on top of it. incredibly well organized. It was a 4-year school with an intense structure. And at every point, it was like having my own personal experiences and then having those reinforced by the experiences of the people around me. It just is inarguable. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's something. It's definitely something.
So if you were to have a conversation with yourself in those years where you hadn't tried it yet and you're rolling your eyes at all the woo-woo people around you, what would you say to you while you're in that space? Is there anything that you know now that could have convinced you if you think back to where you were most skeptical?
It comes back to actually the place where I sit now, which is that the language that people use around it may not be the right language to describe what's happening, but something is definitely happening, and that something is invaluable.
Do you think the languaging, we'll just call it new agey type of languaging, tends to create that barrier, that disconnect with people?
You know, it can. It's sort of like Marmite, like you either really are attracted to it or you really super turned off by it. You know, for some people, I find that sort of soft, woody, woo-woo language is very appealing. Like there's something in that intuitive space, you know, where people do feel they're moved emotionally when you talk about energies, where it's like, are you blocked? Do you need to have whatever's blocking you cleared away? Right? Like that's like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I do have that. Can you do that? But especially for the super sciencey, and I find especially people who just are really turned off by the potential damage that can be done. I think that's a place where for a lot of really left-brain people it gets very scary, is a place where people want to substitute New Age for medical care. So this place of, oh, like doctors are bullshit and you shouldn't take their like Western medicine as poison, and I'm not going to have my cancer. I know I might not get my cancer treated for chemotherapy. I'm just going to do it with the power of positive thinking. I think that all of the New Age language around chakras and energy, because it's not randomly, you know, double-blind control tested. And also this place of cultural appropriation, this idea that like we're taking something, basically a Hindu conceptualization, that we're doing that like incredible American thing of just mashing it together. You know, we're going to pull in all these things about chakras and energies, and we're going to talk about all this yoga stuff, but we're not actually going to give our respects to Hinduism. But that's sort of the glory of like American culture, is that.
Yeah, we're like stripping it for parts and.
Right, we're like these sort of brilliant magpies. We take things apart and we put them back together how we want them. We're postmodernists, like we decontextualize and we put things together in a way that feels right and good for us now. And so there's a benefit in that. So I feel like in the language, it sort of depends on where you land. Some of my clients really don't like it when I start being skeptical, you know, or if I make little jokes about like, this is completely insane, I don't actually know what's happening. Like, they don't want that. They want me to be the guru lady.
Yeah, well, in one interview with Vicki Wickhurst a couple interviews ago, it was interesting because she was citing all these studies about how important it is that the practitioner believes that it works.
Yes.
How it works isn't important, but the fact that you believe it,
yes,
you know, it has nothing to do with the client. So
right.
I understand why they might be a little disconcerted or.
Right, totally. But, and it's funny to me because it's like, at no point am I ever saying like, I don't believe that this isn't real. It's just that I don't know what it is. And I feel like that's a place where, sorry, this is a new thought for me. I don't mean to take your podcast to do my internal epiphany thinking.
Hey, we're all here to help.
But I'm having a new thought.
Yeah. I love it.
And it's this idea that we have a hard time not knowing. I think in general, people have a hard time sitting with mystery. Yeah, it's your guardian angels talking to you. Yeah, it's your second chakra, and it's clogged, and it's full of mucus, which is, you know, leftover stagnant energy from a past history of sexual abuse. I can put all that language around it and spin a very concrete story. But I also can spin a story that's equally beautiful. It's like, I don't know why you're crying. I don't really understand what I'm doing when I'm moving my hands this way. I don't understand what's happening between us. The only thing I know is that something is happening, and it's profound. I'm really curious about that place. I'm happy in that place. People who are attracted to me are like, yes, awesome. I love that you acknowledge that. Like, people will be laughing on the table and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad you said it, because I was totally wondering what you're doing. And I'm like, I don't know, but it feels good, right? And they're like, yes.
Yeah, I do love the fact that you are that frank about it, because I think it's one of those things where in the energy healer world, it's unspoken, those types of ideas or thoughts, or, you know, like makes you feel like you're not worthy of being in that position or in that role.
And I think too, I think people can be defensive around it.
And to take it even further, I know some people on the woo-woo side will only hang out with fellow woo-woo people to the point where they start to create this separation with the left brain world. And, you know, that's kind of defeats the purpose.
Right. It's like, I don't want to spend time with people who aren't like, quote unquote, like on the path. You know, it's like, I have a lot of friends who are like, I don't want to date somebody who's not like on a journey.
Right.
You know, and it's like, and again, it's funny because like I have both, where it's like, I love and respect that. In all therapies, it is really good to look at why you're doing what you're doing. Like, I look at myself all the time for like, am I wanting to be superior to someone? Like, am I compensating? You know, more accurately, how am I compensating for my insecurities? And what am I bringing into session? And how can I be really clean about that so that I'm not contaminating the work that I'm doing with whatever my stuff is, you know?
Yeah, and I agree about the balance of friendships. Like, I have a few friends who are self-proclaimed atheists, flat out, but we have this respect towards each other. And I love the fact that they let me play with their world.
Yeah.
You know, I'll do energy techniques with them, and they're amazed. And, you know, it doesn't mean that they're going to go out and sign on full on to the woo-woo mentality, but it's great that we can interact that way.
Yeah, completely. I remember like when I was first getting my Reiki attunements, I had this girlfriend who was super linear. Her dad was the head of medicine at University of Minnesota or something. Like, you know, just like very sciencey. She was a science editor for like a nonprofit that's trying to cure whatever diseases in Africa. And I was doing Reiki on her. She just started doing acupuncture and was sort of blown away by that. And I was like, well, let me just try to do Reiki on you, and then you can tell me if you feel anything. And I've had the same proof over and over again where it's like, I don't have to know what's happening because something is clearly happening. You know, it's like by the end of it, she's like, oh my God, like your hands were so hot. And I'm like, I know, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, that whole idea about being a conduit, and you don't have to know how it's happening or why it's happening, but just that it's happening. And what irks me in the spirituality world is when clients or even fellow energy workers start to put people on a pedestal, like, oh, you're such a powerful healer, and oh, this teacher is such a guru about this or that. And that just, it annoys me, because we're just conduits. It's not us.
It's not us, you know, and it's so funny. My vanity and my ego always get engaged around that phrase, powerful healer. Like, I want to be a powerful healer, you know, like I want it. Like, I want people to talk about, you know, that I have lightning hands or like whatever the thing was, you know, like they were barren, but then they came to see me for 3 sessions and then they're having a baby. Like, you know, I actually was reading in one of the Barbara Brennan books. There's 2 of them. One is Hands of Light and one is Light Emerging. And I just call them like the blue one and the purple one. And one of them, she talks about that ego loop and that place of wanting it. And she's like all in. Like, she has a guide who comes to her, she channels, and she talks about like she's doing this session and basically her guide sort of like leveled her up, where she's like working at a higher intensity, at a more specific granularity. And all she could think was like, like now I'm this super powerful healer. And what I love about the story, she had a moment where she's like, and then I basically asked them to not give this to me until I could handle it without turning into like a megalomaniac, basically, which I love. Like, that's one of the really cool things about her training. I mean, I didn't go to her school. I went to a school that was based on her school. But one of the things that seems to be really baked into the DNA of her thing is my teacher kept talking over and over and over again about the maturation of the personality and how important it was. And I think this comes from her background as a therapist as well. You know, with Reiki, it's like you're totally just a channel. Like, you lay on your hand and you turn on the tap. Like, Reiki comes in through your crown. With the Brennan School, you're pulling it up through your root. You're super grounded and you're very intentional. Like, you're very active. Like, you're an active participant. So there's just like a lot of talk around like basically working through your shit so that you're not wrecking people. Like that you're basically not doing harm. You know, we talk a lot about the difference between like fixing and healing, where fixing is like, we're just hanging out and I'm like, oh, like your second chakra is blocked. Like, I'm just going to clear that out without really talking to you about it or like doing any sort of big integration piece with your personality. Whereas healing is sitting with sort of your whole system and then checking in with the second chakra and thinking like, is your second chakra maybe blocked for a really good reason? Do you maybe need a lot of structural reinforcement before we even begin to talk about your second chakra issues? So being more respectful, more deliberate, having more of an intention versus having an agenda.
Yeah, there's a modality called the emotion code. It's based on the idea that we all have a heart wall, he calls it. And I'm actually going to interview him in a week or two. So everyone has a heart wall, and it's made up of stuck emotions that as children or even past lives, if you subscribe to that idea, stuck emotions get stuck in you. And then you can release them. It can be a certain number of feet, like ranging from 600 feet down to 30 feet, or no heart wall at all if you so choose. But I know, and I've heard stories of practitioners who have clients come in and they say, okay, let's just remove your heart wall completely. And it sends the client into a loop, into a tailspin, because they're not prepared for that. And just in general, people have these protection mechanisms up, like you said, with the sacral chakra, the second chakra. And so you have to be so careful about keeping your agenda, your projections as a practitioner out of it, because it can be very upsetting and dangerous for a client to just start pushing things on them when they're not prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about hypnosis, because it's a topic I know very little about.
Yeah.
And most people, including myself, have this vision of hypnotists putting people in a trance, getting them to bark like a dog. So is that really possible with hypnosis?
I personally haven't experienced it. I've never even seen stage hypnotism, as my friend kept saying, at the high school gym, or at the county fair or wherever. Like, I've never been to a place where it's been used as entertainment. But I understand from all the reading that I have done that that's totally possible. The key ingredient for hypnosis is being willing. So really your conscious mind just kind of goes to sleep. It just takes a break, like it goes out for a smoke break. And then as a hypnotist, you're talking directly to the subconscious mind, which is like almost like a child. Like the subconscious mind is like weirdly literal. It's just very direct. Like it runs whatever you put into it. Like there's not a lot of discernment, I guess. You slap a loop into that thing and it's just going to run. That's a place where I feel like hypnosis is really effective in therapy. Like, have you ever had an experience where, like maybe there's like a habit you want to change, or there's a neurosis that you're working with, something, right? Some personal thing. And consciously you're like, like I know why I do this thing. I know I'm doing this thing and I keep doing this thing and I don't know why. So your conscious mind is totally on board with it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm stress eating because it's like giving myself a hug from the inside and that's how I feel safe. But you're not really getting down into like the programming level. You're not getting down into your sort of subconscious reasons. So in your conscious mind, I'm like, I'm not going to eat cake. But then you get into the subconscious and it's like, you can really pull up these much deeper reasons about like, what's actually happening when you're eating the cake. And, and it turns out, like, I do a lot of inner child work. That's the modality that I'm trained in. So there's a lot of like regressions. So we'll start with focusing on your body and you're like, okay, so let's bring up the last time that you stress ate and really be in that moment, and you bring it up to really full intensity. The imagination is really engaged. The client is really deeply entranced. They're willing. They trust you. So you bring up that intense feeling. And then you maybe do some process work around that, just in that space where it's like, what's happening in your body, what does your stomach want to say to you, that sort of thing. And then the part that's really lovely is that you go, okay, so now I'm going to tap your forehead or whatever your regression technique is. And we're going to do a little time traveling, and we're going to go back to the first time you remember feeling this feeling in your body. It's all anchored in the body, which is a little different than other modalities. So you bridge back, and you don't put any judgment around it. It's like in your mind, you might be like, oh yeah, like I should go back to that time I was 15. But instead what ends up happening is that you're 5 and you're sitting on a fence in a field and your dad is, whatever, disappointing you or not disappointing you. Like you're having some experience where some part of you gets in a loop, right? And that part of your subconscious I like to call them the littles. Like the little Amy's are totally like rioting right now, you know? Like the girls are super restless. Everybody needs something. And so in hypnosis and a hypnotic regression, what you do, so you're basically reactivating the ego state of the original trauma, doing your therapeutic work there, which is a different kind of neurological release. And so that to me is the part of hypnosis that I am fascinated by and I'm really humbled by and interested in. And then the modality that I've learned is that so you do this ego state activation and then you basically have a corrected experience in that hypnotic regression state, right? So you bring in the experience, whatever the original thing was, and, you know, you're crying, you're 5, and then you do a really lovely healing piece in that space where you're like, okay, so there are all these metaphors, right? Like a safe place, a safe adult, the guardian, it's like all these symbols, these beautiful symbols that the subconscious mind offers up that are really effective because they're coming from inside the client, right? They're generating these symbols. And so you go, okay, so let's bring in your whatever, you know, whatever it is your resource is. Let's bring in that big white horse. Let's bring in your guardian angel. Let's bring in your adult self. What do we say to this 5-year-old? What do we say to this little girl? And you start to frame and correct and you make new resolutions, and like 9 times out of 10, it is like effective. I mean, first of all, people come out of it having had this, they have this deep healing in this way that's so much more than I'm not going to eat at 11 o'clock at night anymore. That's an incredible side effect, but it's really just a side effect because what you've done is you've done this big healing piece at the original wound, right?
Yeah. If you are removing or reprogramming these habits that people don't like, and let's just say eating peanut butter,
Sure.
eating ice cream.
Yeah.
And like you said, if there's more emotions, childhood things driving that, have you found that the person will just turn to something else? Like instead of eating ice cream, oh, now I'm going to eat potato chips.
A lot of times that'll happen if you just do symptom treatment. So like when people are looking for a hypnotherapist or, you know, someone to work with who's going to use hypnosis as a technique, that's a really great question to ask them. I mean, a lot of times that's why people want to go into hypnosis, frankly, is because they're sick of their shit and they don't want to dig into it, which is understandable. Like, you know, it's like, can I go to you and I'll basically be unconscious and then you flip a switch in my head where you tell me not to smoke anymore? Can we just do that? Yeah, but generally, like, the duration and effectiveness is not going to be as lasting. And a lot of times, whatever it was that the person was using that behavior to self-soothe is going to come out in some other way. Even if you end up not smoking, it's whatever anxiety that was is going to be going somewhere.
Yeah, and that sounds like the responsible thing to do as a practitioner if you know that there's something driving it, to really encourage the client to take a deeper look, like, hey, let's talk to your inner child.
Yeah, right. And I feel like there's a place for both. You know, it's like I have a therapist that I worked with who says this lovely thing where he says, you know, some people are damaged enough that the most that you can hope for as a therapeutic goal, and he didn't mean this in a condescending way at all, it's very practical. It's just like, really the most that you can hope for them for health is that they live a compensated life. And you want to help them have as healthy a relationship with their compensations as they possibly can.
Oh, I really like that perspective. That's, yeah.
Right? Isn't that beautiful?
Mm-hmm.
It's very soothing to me as a, like, I mean, I feel like I'm a relatively young practitioner. I feel like it takes a long time to really mature as a healer. And so it took a lot of pressure off. You know, it takes that sort of God complex part out of being a healer where it's like you're saying, it's like I'm just a channel. Like, I don't have to have a codependent relationship with my clients where I'm responsible for fixing their stuff. They're fully empowered people who are in charge of their own thing. And sometimes the best thing for them is to help them live a beautifully compensated life and to not judge that or think that that's a failure on anyone's part.
Yeah. So I finished a master's program in spiritual psychology. And one of the most useful things that I remember was that never make assumptions about how the client is processing, because you may have some idea like, oh, they didn't cry in the session, or, oh, they didn't do this, or they have a stoic expression. Nothing's happening. I'm a failure. But then they'll come back a week later and say, you changed my life.
Right, totally.
Or, you know, thinking that it needs to go at a certain pace. And it's like you said, I really like that perspective.
That is really hard for me. I feel like that is a little bit of a drawback of going the woo training route. In the full therapist route, there's so much mentorship, and that whole like releasing any idea that you might have about what's happening for the client. Really hard, but it's really super important.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me what people's emotional programming blueprint is. I just recently did this training on neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which people may have heard of, but what you talked about earlier about tapping on the forehead or how things get anchored, what they call it, anchoring.
Anchoring, yep. Hypnosis uses that same language.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and that was so interesting to me. He gave the example of hugging or physical contact. You know, someone dies, you're in sorrow, you're in grief, and someone comes over and gives you a hug. You're anchoring in hugging with grief.
Yeah.
Someone's really happy or they're, you know, whatever, you hug them. Okay, now you're anchoring in happiness.
Yes.
You know, that anchor, the hug anchor is so complex and so interesting how it plays out in people. And so you meet people who maybe are not so thrilled about hugging, and you make all these assumptions about what that is, but you don't know what their life is. You don't know where that physical anchor or how that got anchored into them, and to really understand that it's not just about wanting to hug someone or not.
Yeah, completely. Right. It's so much more than just the physical act. It's got this whole suite of associations.
Yes. And on the flip side, you can use the physical anchoring aspect of your brain, how that works, to reprogram your brain, which is what I think is really exciting.
Yeah, super cool. So that's the place. Again, I wish that I knew more about NLP, because I feel like basically NLP and hypnosis are like, if not siblings, definitely first cousins. They're totally related.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about how hypnosis might work more easily with certain people. How would someone know if they're a good candidate for hypnosis therapy?
You know, I actually don't know the answer to that question. I feel like most people are good candidates because, again, it's really contextual. If you want to do it, you're a good candidate. How's that?
That's a great answer, actually.
I mean, because that's the most important part, is being open to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gets back to that whole intention thing again.
You know, and we get hypnotized all the time without realizing it. Like, we have road hypnosis. You know, it's like you're in the car and you're staring at the road for a long time and you space out. You're basically in a hypnotic trance. When you're watching TV, you know, any activity where you're doing where you're absorbed and the world falls away, and definitely like when you're watching TV, you know, it's like you just go into the TV or into the whatever, into the book you're reading. Like, if you ever do a thing where like you read a book and then your mood is like the mood of the book until you're done with the book. You know, I'm like, why were my 20s so angsty? And I'm like, oh, I was reading like...
Or what music were you listening to? Or
what music was I listening to, right? All the things. How am I programming my mind? I feel like consciously deciding to go and do hypnosis is basically, you're just deciding to do the same thing that you do all the time, only you're going to be intentional about it.
Yeah, you know, I had this idea about getting back to NLP, not to take the focus off of your work. But
I think it's fine. I mean, they're totally, we've already established that they're totally related.
Yeah, I had this idea that, NLP is manipulative. I don't know that much about it. So instead of casting all these judgments, I'm just going to go to this brief training and get to know what it is. And he said something that really appealed to my left brain processing, and that is that NLP takes languaging, breaks down the science of it, and puts labels on it. And the act of putting labels on it is where it gets the reputation of manipulative, where he said, I can have a conversation with anyone who hasn't been through NLP, and everyone uses the languaging pattern that NLP trains you in, but they just don't label it. And so he said, I can talk to someone and I can label every single sentence that they say and what type of languaging it is. And so you take counseling, like one of the things that we learned was heart-centered listening or valuing the client. And now NLP has a label for that process. Now is suddenly spiritual psychology manipulative.
Right.
So it's really, it comes down to intention and to not get caught up in the labels that NLP uses. So that really switched it for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a certain resistance in general to breaking down and labeling interactive patterns. Like, a lot of my super intuitive friends really sort of bristle at it. Like, there's this place of like that I'm sacred and whole and unknowable, and, you know, our interactive patterns are totally organic and let's go with the energy, man, which I love and I have a lot of respect for. I mean, frankly, I could probably stand to spend a lot more time in that space. It would probably be really good for me. But there is a place where I feel like people just get squicked out by putting labels, like breaking down interactions and putting labels on them at all, which is a shame because it's intensely useful. Like, I'm a huge fan of the Gottman's couples therapy, you know, and Malcolm Gladwell's Blink.
Yes, I love that book.
Right? So, like, the relationship guy who can tell if people are going to get divorced after watching them for 3 minutes. That's science, yo. Like, that's like...
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Like, they've got a whole thing. And it's like, just because you're breaking it down and putting labels on it doesn't disempower it or invalidate it or make it less beautiful. You know, it's sort of just like just acknowledging that not knowing is powerful and lovely. You know, that's so funny. Oh, my God, I just realized I contradicted myself, right? So it's like there's this one place of like, we want to put all these labels on things that are really woo-woo, like, you know, talk about my chakras, tell me about all the things. And it's like, those are things that I'm not comfortable putting labels on because I'm not really sure. But the things that I am comfortable putting labels on that have been like tested and reinforced and observed over and over again in a sort of controlled environment, people get a little bit like riled up about. And they're like, no, like it's demystifying it. It's breaking it down. It's sort of like, I used to have this boyfriend who would say, you know, I give you a flower and you look at the flower and it's beautiful. And then you tear apart the flower to see what makes it beautiful and all you have is just pile of shit. We may have not been a great match. I can see both sides. But, you know, I find that often the labeling, coming back to the NLP piece, is super useful. Like, it's interesting and it doesn't devalue any of the things that you're looking at.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading your bio on your website because the fact that you use earth energies really meshes well with the fact that my experience of you is as a very like down to earth healer, which is so rare.
Yes.
And I really like that matter of fact approach. So if you were to maybe give some bullet points of like what an ideal client is for you or with the type of person that would gel well with you, if people are curious about hypnosis or some of the Barbara Brennan techniques that you talked about earlier, how would you describe a client that would be a good fit for you?
I have such amazing clients. I'm super in love with all my clients.
Besides someone who swears a lot, maybe?
Besides someone who swears a lot, people have to have a really high threshold for the swears. But I'm apologize. Are you going to have to beep all those out? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I probably lost my clean rating, but you know, a little edit and Audacity, and we're good. We're good to go. So. All
right. Sorry, friends in podcast. So the swears, a high tolerance for the swears. Sort of my ideal client is I like people who are open and curious and willing to tolerate being present with themselves. Sometimes they need help with that. Like I feel like that's a lot of the role of any healer is to help people tolerate the intensity of things that's why you end up going to see a healer or a therapist, is that you have things that you just can't quite get at on your own. So yeah, you know, open and curious and present, and people who, let's say, almost like there's a certain like an emotional bravery. And you don't have to think of yourself as brave, but just a willingness, I guess, a willingness to be present with whatever emotions come up.
Do you find that there's a pattern of the types of issues that you work with? Is there a theme in your clientele?
Yeah, they come in waves. I had a long run of women who were going through some sort of midlife crisis, like some sort of career crisis, while simultaneously struggling with fertility, which is like a very specific, like that's a super specific thing. But for the longest time, like that's just who I saw. And then that shifted. People usually come to me when they are in some sort of big life transition. They're having a job thing, or they're having a divorce thing, or they're having a health thing that is sort of profoundly disruptive. So for a long time, I was getting people, like, all I was doing, it felt like, was just like hanging out on people's hips, like the sacral and the second chakras, and really doing all of this crazy anger work. All these women with just like anger just crammed into their hips. And so it was just a ton of reclaiming power and anger release and anyway, this whole therapeutic thing.
Is that where most women carry anger, or does it just vary from person to person?
You know, in my experience, that's usually where women tuck it, is right into those hip bones, kind of on either side of the second chakra. I feel like we get these big pockets of just like being so mad, resentment. Yeah, and then for a long time I had a lot of fifth chakra issues. You know, and I wonder too, this is one of those things where I wonder about the relationship between the healer and the client, and that, of course, as I'm working on people, I'm like, oh, like this is every healing that I do has yielded some beautiful insight into my own stuff, right?
So the fifth chakra would be, just for the listener.
Oh, so that's your throat, and that's a lot of hearing and speaking your truth. People who tend to be really intellectual, people who really like to be, I mean, I'm very heady, as they say, like I'm really up in my head. You probably couldn't guess that. So a lot of times energetically, there's an anxiety and a fear about connecting with the sort of deep, chaotic, unknowable feelings in the body, right? Like all the intuitive, weird body feelings. And so energetically, that can manifest as like a big, chunky block in the throat. And it's interesting because as I'm working, like I see, like I'm very kinesthetic, like I feel how things feel, but I also get a lot of images. So like I was working on this one woman and I'm like pulling all this stuff out of her throat. I'm like, God, what's in your throat? And I'm like pulling it. And it's like, it feels like, God, this feels like old cigarette wrappers. Like, you know, like that cellophane on the outside of cigarette packs, but it feels like really old and yellow. And I'll report as I'm working where I'm like, this is the image I'm having around the thing that I'm doing. Just, what do you think? And so I'm telling her, oh, it feels like all this plastic. And she goes, oh my God, that's my mom. Like, she's like, that's my mom smoking and telling me to shut up when I was like, whatever age that was. Like I had one woman who I was like pulling all this stuff out of her sixth chakra, which is like your third eye, your sort of intuitive space. And I'm pulling all this stuff and I'm sort of laughing because she has a PhD in philosophy. And so I'm clearing it out and it just felt like all this paper. And I'm like, but we got to get all this Heidegger out of your head. You know, and she had been like eyes closed and really enjoying it. And her eyes just flew open and she looks at me, she goes, why did you say Heidegger? And I'm like, I don't know, Heidegger. Like it just made sense. And she's like, well, that's what I wrote my PhD thesis on. Oh,
wow.
Right. I'm like, well, it seems like it's jamming you up now.
Huh.
So, yeah. So, like, in terms of validation, it's like, I just have, like, little moments like that in almost every healing where there's something, again, where I'm like, I don't know what our connection is, but it's something.
Yeah. What would you say to skeptics who don't think what you do is real? Like,
I would say maybe they're right. Like, I
love that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're right. Maybe, you know, I mean, one thing that I think about in my skeptic side is it's like, well, like, what is another possibility? I feel like I call them the invisible people, but it's like, I'll totally be working on people and feel this intense pressure that feels like it comes from outside myself to say things to people. And the only language I have for that is channeling and guides. Or I'll have these intense feelings of like love and presence where I'm just like, oh my God, like your guys are so proud of you. Like I'll be misty and I'm like, your guys are so proud of you. Like you're doing all this amazing stuff. Like what else could that be? Like that's the story that I have for it. But what other story is there? Like, I don't know, maybe it's the collective unconscious. Maybe it's dual voluntary hypnosis where we both are agreeing to hallucinate about a certain thing. Who knows what it is?
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, this has been just a delightful conversation. That's not a word I use normally, but I just feel like saying it right now.
Thank you. Again, I apologize for the editing work that you're going to have to do. Oh, no. I really hadn't even thought about that.
No, that's no problem. But before I let you go, let's switch over to some like fun questions. Okay. Get out of the woo-woo world, or not, depending on what your answers are. So the first question is, what was your favorite music group that hypnotized you as a child?
Oh my gosh. My parents were really into music. I remember, I totally remember being like maybe 6, this will date me, and my mom had bought Barry Manilow's Copacabana. And And I was like deep into it. Like I remember like being home by myself. Like, she'd have to go to work and she's like, okay, you're going to be home alone for like an hour. So don't burn the house down. And I would put on Copacabana and I would like dress up, and like my mom's whatever. And then I would do this like wild interpretive dance. The story of Tony and Lola and Rico.
Wow.
I think that's probably my first music hypnosis experience.
Yeah, that's going to be some interesting stuff to deconstruct.
Totally right.
On the hypnosis table, yeah. How did that get seated? What kind of programming came out of that?
I wonder it took me so long to stop going to bars. Like I was waiting for something to happen.
Yeah. All right. So the second question is, who was your childhood hero? Did you have one?
I don't.
Or I'll give you the option. What was the worst thing you got in trouble for with your parents as a kid? I've found that I've had some feedback from guests who have said that, oh, it's interesting what that brought up for me. So I thought, my counselor kicked in. I thought, oh dear, I'm putting people in a negative space. Let's take that question out. But I'll give you the option if you want to answer that.
It's a really interesting question. It's easier for me to answer than the childhood hero. For heroes, I didn't have a really super solid one. But I have a very solid answer for the worst thing I got in trouble for as a child was that I went through a turbulent period when I was about 10 where I had a lot of feelings and I was really flexing on the swearing. And my mom told me that I should try to write my feelings down. Like, yeah, maybe that'll be helpful for you. Great advice, right? Like, yeah, go write about it. What she didn't really clarify for me was that I should do that privately. That should just be for me, and other people don't get to know about it. And so I wrote this incredibly vitriolic, just really horrible, foul letter about my fifth grade teacher who made us come in from recess early. And I was just like, that's fucking bitch. Sorry, beep beep. And then they found it, and I got in crazy trouble, huge trouble.
So it was, yeah.
Right. My mom was like, that is not what I meant.
That's a popular emotional processing technique where you just write it all out and then burn it. You forgot the burning step, erase your evidence.
I forgot the burning part. I just left it I just left it on my desk.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. All right. And then lastly, what is the number one thing on your bucket list? Oh, golly.
I still want to go around the world. I think that's the number one thing on my bucket list.
What does that look like?
That means having just a mountain of money and maybe a year off, maybe even more than that. And just getting to travel in a leisurely, organic, totally intuitive fashion, wandering from spot to spot as the wind blows me. And who knows what, casting myself into the waters of the gods and just getting blown around the world sounds amazing.
Oh, I admire people who can do that, that kind of free spirit sort of personality.
Are you a planner?
Yes.
Yeah. I value you highly. I didn't used to, but now I do. I didn't understand, but you guys make the world look way better.
Yeah. Well,
I probably would want a planner to come with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Good balance there.
Yeah. I would want somebody who was so this is where we're going for the next 3 weeks, and I booked us some hotel rooms.
Okay, yeah, relax now.
Right, exactly. Now you can relax because maybe that's what it looks like for me, is that I actually have a trip planner who lets me feel like I'm doing things super organically, but who's I have some personal assistant who's putting it together. I would give her part of the mountain of money for sure.
All right. Well, thank you again. This was, I love talking to fellow left brain people about the energy world because there aren't that many of them, actually, that have as active of a left brain as mine. I try to keep mine in check, but it was really fascinating just kind of exploring the topics that we did and learning about hypnosis.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was super, super satisfying.
Yeah. So if listeners want to contact you or schedule a session, by the way, you're in Seattle. Do you only do in-person or do you do remote sessions?
I have up to now only done in-person, but if somebody wants to be a guinea pig and try a remote session, I would be totally interested in that.
Okay, let's put it out there to the universe.
Totally.
Yeah. So what's the best way to find you or contact you?
And the best way to contact me is through the internet, through my website, groundedenergyhealing.com, and my email address is amy@groundedenergyhealing.com.
Thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. This has been delightful.
For this week's WooWoo News Corner, I found an article on hypnosis posted on January 2011 on the American Psychological Association's website. In the article, Michael Yapko, PhD, said, quote, "Hypnosis works and the empirical support is unequivocal in that regard. It really does help people. But hypnosis isn't a therapy in and of itself," unquote. The article went on to say that hypnosis has been successfully used for centuries to control pain, reduce stress, and eliminate unwanted habits. Interest in clinical hypnosis is growing, and more psychologists are learning how hypnosis can help their patients. This reiterates what Amy had mentioned in the interview, in that hypnosis can be a wonderful way to supplement emotional therapy. That is to say, it's not the ultimate answer to stopping a bad habit, but rather a great way to treat habits that are indicative of a deeper emotional story. Thank you for listening to WooWoo for the Skeptic. I would love to hear from you if you have any ideas for a show or want to give feedback on an episode. And if you enjoyed my conversation with Amy, subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss a show. And now for your moment of woo. This quote comes from the New York Times in an article from 2008. Quote, "Hypnosis is the epitome of mind-body medicine. It can enable the mind to tell the body how to react and modify the messages that the body sends to the mind." Unquote. Have a great week, everyone.